We live in the most health-informed era in human history, with more podcasts, more studies, more supplements, more nutritionists than ever before. And yet, we are the most confused about what to eat than at any point in human history. And that's not an accident. The health and wellness industry is worth over $1 trillion, and it is all built on one thing: you not knowing what to eat. I have been deep into this system for most of my life, scanning labels at the grocery stores, wondering if this oat milk is actually good for me, buying supplements that I cannot even pronounce because somebody online with a huge following told me that my energy depends on it. I wasn't stupid, I was paying attention to all the wrong things. You see, the things I was paying attention to were designed in order to be paid attention to. And the thing that I know right now is that eating cleaner than 99% of the people around us is not complicated. It never was. But understanding why it was made to feel complicated, that changes something. Because once you see the mechanism, you cannot unsee it anymore. And the answer to eating clean becomes almost embarrassingly simple. Let's go back about 50 years. The 1970s, heart disease is becoming a major problem in most of the world. Scientists are trying really hard to figure out the reason why. A researcher by the name of Ansel Keys puts forward a theory that dietary fat is the lead cause to heart disease. The idea starts spreading like wildfire. Governments adopt it, the food pyramid gets built around it, an entire generation grows up being told to eat less fat and more grains. School lunches change, hospital dietary guidelines change, the advice of basically every Western government changes. And all of that is based on one man's theory that is later seriously challenged by research. The fat era begins. Of course, the food manufacturing companies respond immediately. They strip out fat from everything and replace it with sugar. Because you see, fat is what makes food taste so good. If you remove it, you need something else. Low-fat yogurt, fat-free cookies, reduced-fat peanut butter becomes available everywhere. And these foods and these companies really have nothing to do with health. They are purely business decisions. Then a few years go by and the science starts shifting. Fat is no longer the villain. Now it's carbs. And that's how the low-carb movement explodes. Atkins becomes a household name. A whole new category of products start appearing. Products like low-carb bread and keto bars that are showing the net carb amount on the packaging. And then it's gluten, then inflammation, then gut health, then seed oils. Every few years there's a new framework, new villain, a new reason why you need guidance. But did you already notice what has stayed consistent through all of it? You see, nobody is being confused about beef. Nobody is telling you that eggs need to be reformulated. Whole animal foods do not have ingredient lists. They don't have huge marketing budgets. They cannot be slightly improved and sold at a higher margin. They are just sitting there quietly through every single dietary revolution of the last 50 years. Unchanged, unsponsored, and unbothered. And somehow they are the controversial ones. So the question is, why does all of this keep working? Because every few years when the framework is changing, the feeling that you have, that stays the same. The feeling that you are almost there, that you almost have figured it all out, that you only understood this one new thing, then you would achieve all of your goals. And that feeling is the product. Think about what happens when somebody goes on a low-fat diet and fails. They don't blame the diet. They don't blame the advice. They blame themselves. Maybe they were not strict enough. Maybe they missed something. So what do? They go out and they start looking for the next framework. And the industry is right there, ready to provide them with one. So if low fat didn't work for you, try low carb. Oh, low carb plateaued. Try keto. Keto doesn't do it. Yeah, then maybe it's your gut microbiome, maybe it's inflammation, maybe it's cortisol. There's always that next layer. Always a deeper problem to diagnose. There is always a reason why the last thing did not work that somehow very conveniently points towards the next thing. And the worst part of all of this, the part that makes it so hard to escape, is that each new framework is backed by just enough real science to make it credible. I mean, obviously, gluten is a problem for some people. Gut health is a problem for some people. Seed oils really are bad for you. The protocols and frameworks are not all made up. They are real things, but they are selectively amplified and somehow turn into a universal problem that everybody needs to solve, with products, protocols, and paid guidance. That's what makes it so sticky. You cannot simply dismiss it because some of it is true. So you stay engaged, you keep researching, you keep refining. You kind of become, without even realizing it, a lifelong student of a subject that keeps rewriting its own curriculum. I did this myself for years. Every time I would think that I had this figured out, something new comes out. Whether it's a new podcast episode, a new article, somebody on Reddit writes something. Looking back, throughout all of that period, I was never getting really healthier. I was actually getting more anxious about food, more confused, depending more on external information and research rather than listening to what my body is perfectly capable of telling me. And that's also not an accident. You see, an anxious, confused person who feels almost but not quite informed is the perfect customer. They are engaged enough to keep buying, uncertain enough to keep looking, and just enough educated to make them feel like they are making progress. In order to exit from this loop, you do not need the right framework. You just need to start seeing that this loop exists. What does eating clean actually mean once you have removed all the noise? Here's how I think about it now. If something needs a whole label to explain what it is, it's probably worth noticing. And I'm not saying to dismiss it, but it's worth noticing. A steak doesn't need a label. You know what it is. Your body knows what it is. Humans have been eating it for a very, very long time without anybody needing to decode what it is. A high-protein, low-carb, gut-friendly meal replacement bar, on the other hand, that needs 4 different health claims on its packaging simply to justify its own existence. And once you flip it over and you look at the ingredients, and you see that there's more than 30 of them, that you would never be able to find in the store separately even if you tried. Which one of these two things require more trust being built around them? The health and wellness industry redefined the whole clean eating into something that ironically needs a lot more purchasing. Organic this, cold press that, adaptogenic whatever. And look, I'm not saying all of it is bad. I am saying that the version of clean eating that they are trying to sell you is not simpler than the one that you are replacing. It's more complicated, more expensive, and it still leaves you wondering if you are doing it right. The actual version is so simple that it almost feels offensive. Single ingredient foods, things that were recently alive. Meat, fish, eggs, well, that's the most of it. When I started taking that route, without even expecting it, I stopped thinking about food. And not in any kind of a restrictive way. In a free way. There was nothing to track, nothing to optimize, nothing really to research, and all of that mental space that used to go towards nutrition just opened up. And this is the part that doesn't get advertised, and you don't hear about it enough, because you cannot put it in a package. Now, 2 things are coming up every time that somebody hears this. The first one is cost, and I hear this a lot. People assume that eating this way is going to be very expensive. And I kind of understand where they are coming from. Yes, steak is more expensive than pasta, but this comparison is almost always made incorrectly. Most people are simply comparing steak versus pasta and determining which one is cheaper. They need to start comparing steak to their actual current grocery bill, which includes snacks, sauces, protein bars, supplements, the occasional meal kit, and those healthy packaged foods that are more expensive per calorie than anything else in the store. Remove all of that. Buy ground beef, eggs, and butter. Maybe some organ meats if you want to go further. Your weekly spending will probably go down. It did drop for me at least. And of course I understand if you have a family and only you are going to do this, then I understand your point. But overall it should go down because you're simply buying fewer things. Once you look at the bigger picture. Ground beef is one of the most nutrient-dense and affordable foods on the planet. Eggs are super cheap per gram of protein. And with saying that I don't mean that this is a budget diet. It's just that simplicity costs less by default compared to complexity. The second objection that people have is boredom. And this one I find genuinely interesting because what people are actually describing to me when they say carnivore sounds boring, they are describing the absence of novelty. And we have been so conditioned to feel novelty from food that its absence feels like deprivation. But ask yourself, do you actually want to think about food this much? Most people who comment on my videos and have been doing this for a while, almost all of them say the same thing. Food becomes functional. You eat, you feel satisfied, or you hit your target and you move on. And when I just mentioned target, that is more aimed towards people who do not have satiety signals. I did make a video about that, it's going to be in one of these corners so you can check it out, maybe you're one of them. But in general, you eat, you feel satisfied, and you move on. You're not thinking about your next meal 2 hours before. You're not standing in the grocery store at one aisle looking at everything for 20 minutes. That mental freedom for a lot of people, that's the whole point of doing this. I, for example, cook most of my meals in about 15 minutes. Air fryer, eggs in the pan, done. By the way, I'm using the Typhodome 2 air fryer. It is just amazing. Link will be in the description in case you want to also check it out, and you can use the code MEATMEAT for a 10% discount. And when it comes to salt, and I also add some Redmond real salt. That's it. One sentence is my whole recipe, and that's efficiency. But I do want to be honest about something that nobody ever warned me about. The food part, that genuinely gets easy. The cooking, the shopping, the decisions, that simplifies very fast. What doesn't simplify is what happens around the food. The first time somebody close to you watches you eat plain steak, while they are sitting next to you with what they call a balanced meal, there's that moment, that look, maybe a comment. Is that all you're eating? Isn't that bad for your heart? You cannot just eat meat, that's not sustainable. And you quickly start to realize that stepping away from food complexity makes other people very uncomfortable. Because food is a social thing, it's cultural. It's all wrapped up in care and tradition, an identity that has nothing to do with nutrition at all. I have sat at dinner tables where I was the problem, and I wasn't being difficult. I would eat before I go places. I will figure it all out. But my presence as somebody who's eating differently somehow created friction that had nothing to do with something I would have said. Just somehow the choice itself acted as a comment on everybody else's choices. And people really do feel that. You're at work, it's lunchtime, everybody is sitting, discussing, deliberating what they're going to eat, looking at the menus, and you're just there sitting. Not hungry, not stressed, but slightly outside of the overall experience. Food used to be the social currency that you fully participated in. And now it's simpler, but simple sometimes means separate. And I think that's a real cost. Not a reason to not do it, but a real cost. I have a feeling that in the carnivore community this is not being talked about enough. And I think that's a mistake. Because when people try this out and that friction hits them for the first time, and nobody had warned them about this, it kind of feels like a personal failure. Like they are doing something wrong. While they are clearly not. They are just paying the actual price of simplicity, which turns out to be mostly social. So while the food got easier, the world around it did not. If it is this simple, why don't more people do it? This is the part that I find the most interesting, because it has nothing to do with knowledge. At this point right now, you know what I know. The information clearly isn't the barrier. We have been taught if something isn't hard, then it's probably not working. Eating a bowl of ground beef for dinner feels almost too easy to be healthy. Surely you should be doing more. Surely you might need some extra supplements to go with it. And that feeling, that nagging that this simplicity cannot possibly be enough, that's what years of marketing looks like. Let's take my aunt for example. For as long as I can remember, every single year she has some new diet. She does it for a few months, loses a few kilos, and then gains all of it back, and then the loop repeats itself. 1 year it's low fat, then it's cutting gluten, then some wild detox program she saw somewhere. Every time she starts fresh, fully committed, and every single time after a couple of months, she's back right where she started, looking for the next framework. Complexity for most people causes friction, and friction causes inconsistencies, and inconsistencies are where results go to die. So the people who are actually eating cleaner than everybody else, they are not doing more. They are doing less. And they are doing less in the face of the industry that is trying so hard to tell them that they need to do more. The actual discipline and consistency comes from the willingness to ignore all of that noise. And in order to conclude this video, here's what in my opinion is actually true. The answer was never complicated. The people who are eating cleaner than almost everybody around them are not doing more. They just figured out that the complexity was never designed to help them. And then they stopped participating in it. And if you haven't yet, you can also start, even today. You don't need a 30-day challenge. You don't need to have any kind of a planning phase. Just meat, salt, butter, eggs. That's it. Done. Now the next question that people often have after this is, okay, but what about all the things that I've been told I need? The supplements, the electrolytes, all of that. What's actually worth anything? And what is just adding more noise for the same industry that we spent these last 10 minutes talking about? And that is what we are going to talk about in the next video, because I have been going through all of it just so that you don't have to. If you are new here, this channel is built around one idea. The diet is simple. Anyone who's telling you otherwise is probably selling you something. And if that's the kind of content that you want to see more of, consider subscribing to the channel, leave a like, comment, and also if you want, and most importantly can, support the channel a bit more, there's also memberships that you can join, but you absolutely do not have to. You being here is more support than I could ever ask for. Thank you so much guys again, I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye!